Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Washington Lake Protection Association Early Career Panel for 2026. My name is Clark. I will be facilitating this meeting with our early career panelists who are all observed here. We have we do offer scholarships to undergraduates, master's students, and PhD students. These can be accessed through our website, through our student and early career resources page. There's also a lot of other good content in there, which I suggest you view. This is also where we'll be posting this early career panel recording. We also have a mentorship program here. If you're interested in a professional mentorship with a established professional in the environmental science field, please reach out to the mentorship at walpa.org email with a brief introduction of your interests, and we'll look to pair you with a WALPA member. How did you get your first job, or how did you get into a graduate program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of did it. I don't know if it's the old-fashioned way or not, but this was back in 2016, so this was 10 years ago now. I did not want to stay in the vicinity of where I went to college. I wanted to move back closer to my family. So I didn't necessarily use any network connections from college, partly because I went to the University of Maryland, and primarily the people that I interned with were all part of the Chesapeake Bay kind of research group. And looking back, I absolutely wish that I had worked with them first, since I'm kind of circuitously now back in that field. But I just looked online and I applied to, I think it was 37 positions. It was honestly just an Indeed search. And then got hired by a temp agency. And then I was working in environmental health and safety for a manufacturing company actually in Philadelphia. So very far from where I am now.
Lauren, can you follow up? How did you move from that job, that environmental health job, and sort of manufacturing into where you are now?
Yeah. So when I was working at that manufacturing job, I guess this is where the networking comes in. We farmed out a lot of our permitting specifically to other consulting, like to small environmental consulting firms. And one of the people that I worked with there said that they were hiring at their consulting firm. And so I left that job and joined the consulting firm. And then my partner and I ended up moving to Colorado. And then I got a job with the environmental health department in Colorado, which I was able to, I gained experience at that previous consulting job in air quality. And then when I was in Colorado, I got into air quality compliance. And then I decided to switch up everything and go back to grad school. So grad school was really kind of the big one.
How did you get your first job, or how did you get into a graduate program?
Yeah, similarly, I went to school on the East Coast, and so in moving to Seattle, I didn't have a very robust network here, but I did lean into networking pretty hard. I reached out to people over LinkedIn. I tried to, work with people from my college to see if they knew anybody who was on this coast. And eventually, after doing that for a while, I'd connected with one person, and then several months later, that person emailed me and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity to have a temporary position with the place that I work now." And so I did that. And while I was in that temporary position, I tried to take advantage of learning as many things as I could. I reached out to different people within the department to try and gain as many experiences as I could. And then it was fairly lucky, but I ended up working a lot with the Lakes program while I was that temporary position. And then the current position I have opened up while I was there. And so I was able to apply for that and get it. And I think something that I learned in that process is like interviewing itself, and the job application process is kind of a job. And so every organization does that a little bit differently. So if you can kind of gain some insight into what the organization itself is looking for, do informational interviews, learn a little bit about how that process specifically works for a place that you're really interested in, I think that is very helpful in terms of getting your foot in the door.
When you were, constructing your resume or looking at organizations, like how are you tailoring it to the organization?
Yeah, I think everyone has a different hiring process, and they all think they're intuitive. And I think depends on how your resume is going to be reviewed. I used to apply to jobs with government agencies and wouldn't get a lot of response. And then I had to have someone sit down with me and be like, you have to like these words they list in the description, you need to like use those, in your resume on, obviously the federal jobs are kind of a mess right now, but for example, in USA jobs, there's an option to upload your resume or you can like enter it. And it's much better to enter it so that you can use their verbiage and everything. Sometimes you really have to like hand deliver, make that connection if you can, talk to a human being if you can, make that connection, even just emailing a person that is hiring and just saying, I submit my resume, I'm looking forward to hearing back, whatever. But trying to get that physical or that human connection, I feel like is really important.
Sierra, I want to jump over to you. I'm interested sort of both in like how did you get your first job, but also kind of like where did you get started and like how did you find out your direction to where you are right now? Like
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty lucky because I grew up in the Coeur d'Alene area and I went to school in Lewiston, LCSC. So I knew a lot of people around here. So I think that helped find my position now. But I think as most people, like when you are outside all the time, fishing, camping, hunting, you grow a passion for being outside. And I knew pretty at a young age that I wanted to stick with something in the environmental field. So in my undergrad, I joined a work scholar program where you would work for a certain company in your field and then they would pay your tuition, which is honestly awesome. It really helped a lot. So I would advise that if you can find something like that. But I worked for the Nez Perce tribe and I was working on base flow measurements, which is kind of similar to what I'm doing now. But when I graduated, I just kept bugging Jamie Bruner from the DEQ. I bugged her constantly trying to figure out like, hey, do you have any positions? Do you know anybody? And she told me about some volunteer work with snow science. And there I met a lot of people in different affiliations. And I networked with this lady, Rebecca Stevens from the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And she told me about this position that was open. And I jumped onto that and I applied, I think just through like Indeed as well. And I was lucky enough that I had enough people that knew me to tell my my department manager now that, hey, she's passionate, she wants to work this, you should give her a chance. And so I was lucky enough, like I said, that I knew I got a position. And yeah.
How did you get this this current position you have? For you specifically, I'm interested in what skills you think that you like picked up during school that really helped you prepare for this position, and then how did you market those skills?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll kind of start with how I got into the position, maybe. Mine's fairly straightforward. The last thing I did at college was actually intern for this team. So that's a pretty straightforward path to getting in with the team. I had thought that I wanted to do some marine science beforehand, but I actually found my love with freshwater after working with Mount Rainier. And so the following season, when the season came around, the RE colleges had reached out and, said, hey, there's a position open. You should apply. I've been there for about 5 years ever since, and I love it. So, but with that, I want to emphasize on that internship portion too, because I also did internship with the Fish and Wildlife for about roughly 2 years while I was in college as well. I would go there intermittently, and that also opened me up to some positions. They've reached out to me over the years. Like even it's been almost 10 years, and I think 2 years ago they were even reaching out like, hey, we have this position opening up. Do you want to come? So I think internships are a great gate to going into a team after you're done college. And college is a time to do it, I really do think, while you're attending classes and stuff, if you can fit it into your schedule. So that's how I got into where I'm at. As far as skills that I've learned in college, directly transferable to kind of my position, I think I learned a lot of I took a lot of chemistry courses. Specifically, I took one actually that was about a year long for specifically limnology. And I think that's helped me a lot with my current position. As far as marketing those skills have gone, I did also work with I took a year and a half off about from Mount Rainier, and I got a permanent job with DOE doing marine monitoring. And so that's where I really, had to market my skills to get into a new team, kind of. And so I would say it was applying for a state job, and kind of like what Ty was saying before, you really need to make sure you're reading their posting, hitting all their requirements, emphasizing those things. And then once you do, showing your passion and that human side in your care and trying to relate what skills you do have, even if they're not direct, making them transferable to that position is kind of what I've learned from that experience. I hope that answered all of those questions.
Preston, I'm curious, and you said sometimes you need to stretch some of those skills to another. Do you have an example that you have in mind of not necessarily, I wouldn't say exaggerating, but can you tell us more of an example?
Sure. Yeah. So back to that DOE position, a big portion of it was actually microscopy for taxonomical sorting of marine invertebrates, and I have absolutely no experience doing that beforehand. But I did have some microscopy experience, specifically with bacteria, microbes, and identifying some of them. So kind of just, and also just taxonomy experience in general, which, as long as you can show, hey, I know how to use a key and stuff and can sort down, that helps transfer those skills as well. But yeah.
Gabe has a question in terms of, do you think that a grad degree is essential for getting your current role? And then what advice do you have for choosing a grad school focus?
I'll just say quickly, I don't have a master's. I only have a bachelor's, and I've been working in this field for over 6 years now and happily doing so.
Yeah, just to jump in on that, I would say, like Preston said, sometimes you don't need a master's or PhD or whatever, and it's really, I think you gotta know when you're going into your master's or grad school in general why you're doing it, and it's going to get hard at some point, and you need that to fall back on, like, okay, I'm here because I need this to do this job I want to do or something like that. And in terms of figuring out where you want to go and stuff, I think it really helped me to work a little bit after my undergrad. I think you can only learn so much in your undergrad about what jobs are like and how the field works, and really getting in it and seeing how agencies work, or seeing how the private sector works. Maybe you get an internship with Clark, and you see maybe you learn you really like working in the private sector, and they're doing a lot of applied stuff and putting a lot of things in motion. And so that, I think, is super helpful, like understanding, okay, now I need to go back and do this, so I want to do this thing. And then the last thing I was going to say is, people talk about the 3 Ps: person, place, PI, place, and project, for choosing grad school. And really it's important to make sure you like the advisor you're working with, you like the place you're going to live in, and you're interested in the project. And honestly, they're all really important. And if one or two of those is not there, it can make it a pretty grueling experience.
I also just want to add, I also don't have a master's degree. I only have a bachelor's degree. But I learned most of my skills working in that work. I mean, you can only learn so much, and you can always do like lab days or field days at college, but I learned most of my skills at work. And I think that's how you attain most of your skills.
I agree. But Dominic, there's a question for you, and I think, Lauren, this also would apply to you, is coming to the Pacific Northwest and moving out here to establish yourself as an environmental scientist can be kind of challenging, especially like coming in to a new ecosystem or general like ecotone. And so I'm curious, kind of like, one is the establishing yourself as a network, and then 2 is to kind of learn about a whole new ecology. And so, Dominic, kind of what advice do you have for someone who's emerging here?
Yeah, well, I think a good place to start is to just like think about all the components of your current network and see if there's any tendrils that might reach out there, whether it's people from school or friends that look through LinkedIn, look through your connections, see if there's anyone there, or you can look at certain organizations that you're interested in and see if you have any tangential connections there. Just start reaching out to people. I think volunteering in fields that you're interested in is a great way to kind of get your foot in the door. You might make connections that way. You might start learning about the environment that way. Like, for instance, when I first moved here, I tried to volunteer at a lot of different places. I volunteered with like what was formerly known as the Seattle Audubon, and I made connections there, and I got to learn about some of the native birds and the environments here. So yeah, just looking into opportunities that interest you. If you haven't moved yet, it could behoove you to try to lock something down before you move, because I moved without a job, and that was pretty challenging, just to kind of be here in a place that I didn't know very well and not exactly know what I was doing. That said, I think it could also be helpful to be open to having a job that's not in your field for a little while, if that's something that you need. Like, when I first moved, I worked at a ski shop for a couple of months. I don't ski, and it was fine. And it was just something to do, something to kind of support me while I looked for something that was more in my field. And while I did that, I did a lot of that volunteering and networking, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am now. And just, yeah, immerse yourself in that place as much as you can.
Thanks, Dominic. Lauren, do you have anything to add? Also, kind of jumping into another topic, I'm curious, Lauren, what your day-to-day looks like. Like, what is a typical day for Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't really have anything different to add to what Dominic said. I mean, I worked for, I guess volunteered for as part of my internship for a nonprofit land conservancy in, the Philadelphia suburbs. That's where I was living. That's where I started my career. So Southeast PA all the way. And yeah, I would just recommend there's a ton of conservancy work going on there. There's a lot of environmental remediation on the East Coast. There's a big emphasis on environmental compliance, because that's, the EPA is in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of kind of established regulatory work going on that side of the country. So that's something, if you're not already thinking about that, it's a little bit different on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast. But if you are interested in conservation, there are absolutely a lot of nonprofits on that side that work there as well. So I would recommend, volunteering, doing kind of a good old like Google Maps search of what's around where you're interested in moving. I don't know if you have, Southeast PA is pretty specific, so I imagine there's a reason that you're looking over there. So if you have an idea of where you're going, I would say, just kind of cast a net around you geographically. But volunteering, absolutely the way to go at first if you don't have a job now. And day to day now, so I think I'm the only person on the panel that's in consulting. So my day to day might look a little more insane than your average ecologist, just because we have so many different projects that we work on. Not that you don't in nonprofit work or in working for the government or anything like that, but I'm involved currently in like 12 to 15 different projects. And I'm also writing 3 proposals at the moment. So it looks like a lot of time management. For example, my day today was working on a proposal this morning, and then I biked down to the office and I'm putting together my field equipment for my lamprey surveys up in Wenatchee next week. And so next week I'll be out in the field Monday through Thursday, walking around the Columbia River burial zone in the riparian area, looking for lamprey emerging from the sediment. And then the following week, I will be up on the South Fork Tolt River doing snorkel surveys. And then the week after that, I'll be doing a lot of downloading data from Survey 123 and cleaning it in R, and then doing some geospatial analysis. So that's the next month.
Very, very varied. I have a couple follow-up questions for you. 1, what is a proposal? And 2, what were you snorkeling for?
Of course. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting used to like the business speak.
Yeah.
So I forget that not everybody knows. So in the consulting world, proposal is, you can use it in other fields too, but in the consulting world, the way that you get work typically is companies, whether it's private companies or the government. In this case, the one I'm working on is for Washington Department of Natural Resources. They put out what's called a bid, and that describes a project that they need done and the amount of money that they have to pay someone to do that work. And so there's like a specific set of requirements that they want you to respond to or prove that your firm is qualified to do this work. And it can be really straightforward, or you can have to be really creative with the way that you're kind of pitching your team to do this work. And so, in the one that I'm working on right now, it's really simple. It's called a request for qualifications. So I'm just pulling together a list of my coworkers and our previous projects that are relevant to the work that DNR is looking to get done. And then for snorkel surveys, we're looking at juvenile salmonid habitat use in the South Fork Tolt, below the Tolt Reservoir, which is just east of Bellevue. And it's really cool. That's actually my little profile picture in this. We're out on the Tolt Reservoir, which humans are typically not allowed in because it's the drinking water for the city of Seattle. So it was a really interesting process to get all of our equipment cleared. You can't pee during field work up there. So it's all interesting, fun stuff.
That's great. And thank you for taking the time to talk through the consulting side. I know that when I switched over to sort of the private sector, I used to work at King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. And so there was a lot of learning in terms of what is the business model of environmental consulting, and the amount of time and effort that can go into just finding work or connecting that work. And similar to finding a job, it often can depend on network and who you know and working for strengths. And so in some cases, some folks that you went to school with who you work with a different job, you actually may continue to rely on each other through strategic partnerships within consulting. So that network that you're building now or through interview processes can actually be really helpful down the road in terms of having a successful private sector career. I'm a little interested to kind of hear from other folks in the public or sector for what their day-to-day looks like. So, or nonprofit like you, Ty. So Ty, I'll hear from you, and then I want to jump over to Sierra after that.
Yeah, so this is kind of completely new to me. I used to work for state agencies and universities, and so doing a lot of research. And now my day-to-day looks a lot different. I don't really do research anymore, and it's a lot of talking to people, which I like. I talk to dam owners and I talk to folks at the state agencies. It's a lot of working with people and understanding what a community's concerns maybe about removing a dam and trying to address those by way of gathering relevant information. I do a lot of kind of desktop research about the history of a dam, requesting information on it, looking at how it was built and when and why, and if there's been any violations since it was built, that sort of thing. So, but it's a lot of gathering information and curating it and communicating science and then just working with people. So it's been a big shift for me, but I really enjoy it.
Thanks, Ty. Sierra?
Well, like I said, I'm pretty lucky. I get to be outside all the time. I'm doing a nutrient load study on the St. Joe watershed, and we have 29 sites. And day to day, we go to at least 2 or 3 of the sites. Usually, it's not too much hiking down to the area, but there can be pretty steep hills and it's a lot of cardio. Most of the time we take discharge. We do water samples, and for water samples, we are testing for total nutrients, which would be total nitrogen, total phosphorus. We also test for suspended sediments, as well as orthophosphate and ammonia. And we also have a water quality tool where we test for DO, turbidity, pH, conductivity. We also, if we can access it, because sometimes the water's too low, we have water level transducers, HOPA loggers, and we try and collect that data if we can. But sometimes, like I said, the water's too high. But I don't really deal with that too much of the public, which is nice for me. But I do have some office days with data analysis, and those are nice. But as always, I always prefer being out in the field because I just love being outside.
What skills do you think you're employing for data analysis, and what programs are you using?
A lot of the programs we use is R, the AI format, and I'm not the best with R, but I would suggest for anybody that is still in school to at least get some kind of AI tool because it is the future, unfortunately, or even GIS. I think that is something that a lot of people should start experiencing and practicing with. But for our skills, I think it's mostly just data analysis. You have to do BP corrections.
What is BP?
Barometric pressure.
Okay.
But yeah, for most of the skills, I think you just really have to do some data analysis and just know how to correct your loggers, your data.
That's something you learned on the job. That's what you're speaking to earlier, or did you have experience with that with school?
I actually had to do it for my work scholar program on my internship. We never did that in college, but I kind of taught myself. I did a lot of YouTubing, honestly.
YouTube is great. My truck is running only because of YouTube. So you brought up AI, and I didn't have any planned questions around this, but I'm kind of curious for other folks, like how has AI started to affect either your day-to-day or approaches to work, and in what ways do you think that you would advise using it or warn against using it? Preston?
I haven't seen it really impact my work yet. In my opinion, I feel like there will be a push from it, especially since we work federally. We'll see in this upcoming year. But as of now, it hasn't really affected my work too much.
Dominic?
Yeah, I think in terms of ways that it is useful, for example, like I don't have a tremendous amount of coding experience. So sometimes if there's like an equation that I need or something I need to figure out in Excel or whatever, like, and it's very specific, asking AI to help me with that is useful because I don't even know where I would begin to, figure it out on my own, especially if it's just like one thing. I do think that in terms of like communication stuff, it can be dangerous just because a lot of times it's incorrect or only partially correct. And also, yeah, I just think being able to rely on oneself for communication is important.
Yeah, I think I have to really try to keep it to like it is really helpful for coding, but it is wrong a lot. You have to know enough. Like for me at least, like I had a good, like R is kind of like a language. Like you read it and you're kind of translating it in your head into like common speak, I guess for me. And I could read it, and so I can see when it's wrong, but it's really helpful for coding. But I agree with Dominic, like the thing it can't replace is human interaction. And, I think that's how people will stand out more is like everyone wants someone that is hardworking and curious and like passionate. And if that like shows through, I think that is the biggest thing. And but yeah, I don't use it a lot in my current role because I'm doing a lot of just talking to people. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like 10 years ago we were telling everyone to learn how to code, and now it's like AI is pretty good at coding. So especially at a base level. So I feel like anyways you can improve your people skills. So I think people are going to be craving real human interaction and stuff that appears authentic. Like Dominic said, it does, people will use it to write up communications and stuff. I still think you can kind of tell, and sometimes it's wrong and stuff. And so, yeah, talking to people.
And just to expand on something you spoke to, is it may be good at programming or coming up with an equation, but it is the problem formulation and understanding it where we all take a very important role. And that is something that before, opening up ChatGPT and starting to say, solve this for me, really get a good understanding what that problem is and what you think the solution would be. I can help shortcut writing hundreds of lines of program or 50 lines of text that are related to summarizing some article you read, but you're not going to be able to know whether or not it is accurate unless you really have a good understanding. So do not let it replace your knowledge. Let it only replace your touch typing, right? I love that I don't need to program as much anymore, but that's also because I'm more senior. Lauren, do you have anything you would like to add regarding AI?
Again, I feel like it's probably been mostly covered. I definitely know that it's been helpful for a lot of my colleagues who don't do as much coding as me. I have just gotten really well versed in Stack Overflow. So I still like to use that for a lot of my coding edits because it is real people. It's real people, real programmers, and someone, chances are, has had your coding problem before. And so I'm not going to say I haven't used AI trying it out. I would say the thing that it was the most helpful for me is if anyone's familiar with R on here, they can do a lot with ggplot. I would say AI is a lot better with coming up with a lot of stuff for data visualization in R specifically. But otherwise, I don't know, it's hard. I know it's pretty rampant in a lot of consulting firms. I also know that there's a lot of use of it in stuff like proposals, where it's like you're on a time crunch. What's the easiest way to get this done fast? And so I've had to deal with it a little bit with coworkers where I've seen, like you said, Ty, you can kind of tell when you're reading something that's, I mean, not always. Sometimes it's people just write something awkwardly, but a lot of times it's just sort of like, I know how you speak. And so when I'm reading something like this, I can kind of tell it's a little bit off. So yeah, I would say, I mean, it's a tool. It would be silly not to use it appropriately, though I also know there are a lot of issues with the environmental implications. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of surrounding me in my professional life, but I try to keep it at arm's length for the most part.
We have that mentorship program. That would be love to connect you with one of our panelists or one of our other WALPA members, as well as those scholarships. A lot of good information I shared earlier. So that's great. They'll have the recording. But in moving towards wrapping up, a question is like, what's one thing that you wish you had known before you were graduating, or maybe when you were a junior or as a senior? Starting with you, Dominic.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have talked about coding specifically in R, and I think that I wish I had known a little bit more about that and taken time to like have more of like a structured class in the foundations of that. Like I had a little bit of R training from just like statistics classes or GIS classes, and so I have like rudimentary knowledge of it, but yeah, I think I wish that I had a little bit more experience in it, in sort of that academic setting. And I think that would have helped me a little bit in the projects that I'm trying to teach myself how to do now.
Thanks, Dominic. But also you're teaching yourself. Do you feel like in your current position that sort of like self-learning and a little bit of time is acceptable, or do you feel like you are needing to do that off the clock?
No, I think it's encouraged, actually. We have our department just signed up for Coursera, which there's so many different things that you can learn. And yeah, I think showing initiative and motivation to your employer that you're interested in learning how to do something that can help, with future projects and stuff is super important. And, everyone on our team met kind of early in the year and we're like, okay, what are we working on? What are some skills that we can each build and then bring back to these projects and sort of learn independently and then share with each other? So obviously it'll depend job to job, but I think generally employers like when you say, oh, I'm interested in becoming better at this because it'll help me and it'll help everybody. So yeah.
Thanks, Dominic. Yeah, the important thing to know is when you graduate, you are not expected to know everything and can do everything. And nearly every job, every one that I've had, I think, has a amount of time what they call professional development, which is learning while you're on the job and being paid for it. So that can vary in terms of what that percentage is of time. But know that there's a lot of on-the-job learning that happens, and a lot of that is encouraged because someone is hiring you because they're investing in you. Ty, what is something you would like to wish you had known before graduating?
I think looking at state jobs, honestly, a lot of places that, we were told about, a lot of the job boards like American Fisheries Society, Texas A&M, Natural Resources Job Board, there's a lot of common job boards, but states often don't put, like, Department of Ecology in Washington, I don't think puts their jobs anywhere besides the Department of Ecology's like own job board. And often they can be a lot less applied to. After I graduated, I got a full-time permanent job in West Virginia with a DEP there. And I, like in any other state, I probably would not have been qualified for that job. But that's the other thing I would, remember, like if you're open to living other places, if you target places that aren't necessarily the most desirable, I love West Virginia. It's a beautiful place, but not a lot of people want to live there. I think it's a lot less competitive. So yeah, I think that's something I wish I had known probably is, look at the state job boards and look to places that are maybe not Washington, but yeah, if you're open to moving.
Thanks, Ty. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah. Well, it's funny when I was at the University of Maryland on the East Coast, and there was not really an emphasis on working for any sort of like environmental protection or conservancy when I was there. There was a lot of academic research, like I said, talking about like the Y Research Center on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. So there was a big emphasis on it being a research university, but there wasn't a lot of talk about jobs outside of that field. And I knew I didn't want to get my master's right away. And so that's kind of why I fell into compliance, because when you're online Googling for environmental science jobs, compliance is what comes up for the most part, especially in that part of the country. So part of the reason it took me a while to get around to the job I have now is because there just wasn't a lot of emphasis on science as a job, not in a research setting. And so the fact that I get to do science and kind of in a sense research didn't even know consulting really was an option. So I think, I don't know, just doing a better job of either whether that's talking to your advisor, like your undergrad advisor, or other people at the university. I think just one of those things is like learning more about what jobs are out there, which I think this helps too.
Thank you, Laura. Dira, what advice would you give?
I guess for myself, I think I wish I got more involved earlier at a younger age or even earlier in my school career. Like I said, I was in an internship, but I didn't start until my senior year. And I really wish I did it earlier. And as Lauren said, I would suggest talking to your advisor because they usually know more about what's out there for students and resources. And I would also suggest, like, if you are trying to get more involved, make sure you ask questions to people, because I think showing up is great, but if you show like passion and ask questions, that really shows that you really want to be involved. So I would say just ask your advisor and just get more involved in volunteer work as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Creston.
Yeah, kind of something similar to what Dominic said, though, is learning more about the statistics stuff in college. I focused a lot of my time in college on more fieldwork skills. I didn't spend a lot of time doing like statistics. One thing that I would especially like to learn is like grant writing and stuff like that, which I could see being helpful and as you advance or go higher up. It's even something I've been curious about now, but I don't have much experience there. But one thing, I'll kind of share this in almost a different way. One thing I did learn while I was in college that did work out well is doing those internships to find out what you enjoy. That's a good time to kind of test the waters in a way, if that makes sense. I feel like that gets a lot of that learning out there while you have that opportunity.
Thank you, Creston. And thank you to all the panel, as well as the DEI and Student Affairs Committee for WALPA. Thank you all for those who are attending or watching this online. If you have any questions, we have a general email, info@walpa.org. And also, if you're interested in the mentorship program, we have an email for that, mentorship@walpa.org. This is a fairly informal mentorship program where we pair you with a professional, and I can be meeting every month, every 2 months, every quarter. I have a grad student who I'm working with, and we meet about every month or so to talk through sometimes our challenges, sometimes lifestyle challenges, a lot of what comes next and how can I be more, how can I get the next real job. So we're happy to support with that. We've all been there. We've all had early careers. So please use us as a resource. So again, I want to thank all of our panelists and the committee.